Papa, I came first in my class again.
And what does that do for this family?
My teacher said with support I can go further. He said I have...
Go and help your mother. Your brother has football training tomorrow. We need money for that.
But Papa, I passed everything. I passed everything with distinction.
A girl's distinction feeds nobody. You are not a son. Stop behaving like one.
Yes, Papa.
She did not cry the night she decided to leave. She had finished crying a long time before that. Amara packed what little she owned into a single raffia wag, 2 wrappers, 1 good blouse, a small soap, and the last school report card she ever brought home. The one her father had dismissed without looking at it properly. The one she had held against her chest the whole walk back to the kitchen. She folded it neatly and placed it at the very bottom of the bag, not as a wound, as a reminder. She left before the compound woke up. No note, no farewell, no final plea. She had already tried all of those things with her eyes, with her grades, with her silence, with her obedience, and none of it had worked. So she left the way they had always treated her, like she was not really there. To understand what Amara was walking away from, you had to understand the kind of home she was born into. Okeke was not a wicked man in the way that wicked men announce themselves. He did not beat his daughter or starve her deliberately. His cruelty was quieter than that. It lived in the spaces between things, in the way his face changed when she entered a room versus when her brothers entered, in the way her school fees were always the first thing reconsidered when money was tight, in the way celebrations in that compound always seemed to rise a little louder, burn a little brighter whenever a boy was involved. When Adaku, his wife, gave birth to Amara, the compound went quiet. Not the quiet of reverence, the quiet of disappointment. Okeke sat outside that night and said nothing for hours. His mother patted his hand and told him it was the will of God. His brother said, next time. Nobody asked how Adaku was feeling. Nobody held the baby and said she was beautiful. The baby was fed and cleaned and placed on a mat, and the compound moved on like something minor had happened. That baby was Amara. And from the very first breath she drew in this world, she was already carrying a weight she had not asked for. She grew up in that compound like a plant that had been placed in the wrong soil. She grew anyway. Her mind was sharp, the kind of sharp that her teachers noticed before she was old enough to understand what it meant. She won spelling competitions. She solved arithmetic problems faster than children 2 classes above her. She read every book she could borrow or beg and returned them more carefully than she had received them. But at home, none of this counted. Her brothers, first Chukwuemeka, then Ifeanyi, and finally Baby Tochukwu, were the ones who received the family's attention like sunlight. Chukwuemeka's school fees were paid first and fully. Ifeanyi's uniform was bought new. When Tochukwu was born, the celebration lasted 3 days. A goat was killed. Relatives came from 4 different towns. Okeke walked around that compound with his chest forward and his chin lifted in a way Amara had never seen when she was born. She stood at the edge of that celebration and watched. She was 11 years old, and she already understood something that no 11-year-old should understand. That in this home, her value was not the same as her brother's. That the love here was not distributed equally. That she would have to earn something her brothers had been handed simply by being born. She did not become bitter. She became focused. She studied harder. She helped more around the house without being told. She woke before her mother to sweep the compound. She fetched water before her brothers were awake. She cooked and cleaned and did everything a good daughter does. Not because it came with reward, but because she believed, the way only a child can believe, that goodness would eventually be seen. It was not seen. It was taken for granted. The morning everything broke happened quietly, the way the worst things always do. Amara was 14. She had just received her examination results, the best in her school, top marks in every subject, a letter from her headmaster recommending her for a scholarship examination that could change her life. She came home with that letter like she was carrying fire in her hands. She found her father sitting in the parlor with 2 of his age-grade friends. She should have waited. She knew even then that she should have waited, but the hope in her chest was too big to hold. She walked in and presented the letter. Okeke read it slowly. His friends leaned over to look. Then he folded it and set it on the table. "Amara," he said, not unkindly, "your brother Chukwuemeka is preparing for his own examinations. The money we have is going towards that." "Papa," she said carefully, "this scholarship requires no money. I only need your permission and your signature. And transport, and feeding, and the pride of sending a girl to chase papers while her family needs her here." He looked at her with eyes that were not cruel, just final. "You are a girl. God made you that way for a reason. Your education will come through the man you marry. Focus on being useful." His friends nodded. One of them laughed gently, the way older men laugh when they believe something deeply. Amara stood there for a moment. Then she picked up the letter from the table, folded it again, and walked out. She did not cry in front of them. She was her father's daughter in that one way at least. She knew how to hold things inside until she was alone. That night, she cried until there was nothing left. And when the nothing came, something else took its place. Something quieter and harder. Something that looked like a decision. 2 years later, Tochukwu's naming ceremony happened. He was the 3rd son. The family celebrated as if he were the first. Okeke bought a new agbada for the occasion. Relatives came from as far as Enugu and Owerri. The women danced. The men drank. Food was laid out on tables in the compound in a way Amara had never seen before. She served the food. She fetched more water when the pots ran low. She washed the plates in between rounds of food being brought out. She moved through that celebration like a ghost, present, necessary, unseen. At one point, a relative she barely knew pulled her aside and pressed some money into her hand with a wink. "You work hard, this one," the woman said with a wink. "Your father is lucky to have such a dutiful daughter." Amara smiled and said thank you, but inside something had finally gone quiet. Not the quiet of peace, the quiet of a decision fully made. She left on a Tuesday morning in the dry season. The harmattan was still biting. The compound was asleep. She moved through the dark without a lamp because she knew every corner of that place. She had swept it enough times to know it with her eyes closed. She did not take anything that did not belong to her. She left behind her mother's extra wrapper that she sometimes borrowed. She left behind a small bottle of hair oil. She left behind every object that tied her to that compound. She only took what was hers. And she walked. The road was not kind to her. She had a little money, the money the relative had pressed into her hand at Tochukwu's naming ceremony, saved and added to over months from small errands and favors. It was not much, but it was hers. She made it to the nearest motor park by sunrise and took a bus to Onitsha. Onitsha was loud and fast and overwhelming, and she loved it immediately. Not because it was comfortable, it was not. She slept her first 2 nights in that city on the bench of a church whose pastor took pity on her. She ate once a day for the first week. She bathed at public standpipes and dried herself with the smaller of her 2 wrappers. But nobody in Onitsha knew she was a girl whose father had told her she was not worth investing in. In Onitsha, she was just a person. And a person could become anything. She started small, the way every real thing starts. A woman in the market named Mama Ifeoma took her in after seeing her sleeping on the church bench a 3rd time. Mama Ifeoma sold dried fish and stockfish and crayfish and pepper. She was a round, loud woman with a gap in her front teeth and a laugh that you could hear 3 stalls away. She was also the sharpest trader Amara had ever met. "You want to learn or you want to just sit?" Mama Ifeoma asked her on the first day. "I want to learn," Amara said. "Good, because I don't feed people who just sit." Amara learned. She learned how to read the market, when prices would rise, when to stock, when to hold, when to move. She learned how to speak to suppliers and how to negotiate without begging. She learned that trade was not just buying and selling, it was reading people, reading time, reading hunger, not the hunger of the stomach, but the hunger of a market, the kind that tells you what people will pay anything for when they need it most. She worked for Mama Ifeoma for 3 years without complaint. On the day she turned 19, Mama Ifeoma pressed an envelope into her hands. "I have been keeping something for you," the old woman said. "You think I did not see? Every month I added small to it. You have been my best hand. This is yours." Inside the envelope was enough to start. Amara held it and felt something she had not felt in a long time. Seen. She did not rush. She moved carefully, the way someone who has had nothing moves when they finally have something. She started with grains, rice, beans, gari. She built supplier relationships across 3 states. She was meticulous. She was reliable. When she said a delivery would arrive on Thursday, it arrived on Thursday. When she quoted a price, she held it. Her word became her currency. And in trade, there is no currency more valuable. By the time she was 24, she had a small warehouse in Onitsha. By 27, she had 3. By 30, Amara was supplying food commodities, grains, dried goods, processed foods to markets, schools, hospitals, and government relief programs across the southeast and into the middle belt. Her name in trade circles was spoken with the kind of quiet respect that does not need announcement. She never forgot where she came from, but she also never went back. She had a life now, a real one, built with her own 2 hands. She had a small apartment that she had furnished herself, piece by piece. She had staff who respected her. She had a reputation that preceded her in every room. She had Mama Ifeoma, now old and slow, who she visited every Sunday and cooked for, because some debts are not repaid with money. She had no marriage, not because no one had come. Men had come, but she had learned in her father's house what it felt like to be valued for what you could provide, rather than who you were. She was not interested in repeating that lesson in another house. She had friends. She had quiet evenings. She had the particular satisfaction of a woman who has built something real from nothing real, who knows, in the bone-deep way that cannot be faked, that everything she has, she made. She was happy. Not loudly, not perfectly, but genuinely. Then the rains failed. It did not happen all at once. Droughts are not dramatic in the way that fires are dramatic. They come quietly. One dry season that runs a little long, then a planting season where the yields are lower than expected, then whispers among farmers, then the whispers becoming conversations, then the conversations becoming fear. By the time the full weight of the famine reached the villages, it had already been building for 2 seasons. The community of Umunzi, the village where Amara had been born and discarded, was among those worst hit. The farmland cracked. The cassava that usually fed families through hard months came up thin and poor. The yam harvest failed entirely. Markets that had always been full went quiet, and the families who had once lived with a certain village pride, who had always had enough, who had never needed to go outside their own walls to survive, began to feel for the first time what it meant to not have enough. Okeke's household felt it like everyone else, except Okeke's household had sons. Sons who had been educated and supported and praised and invested in, and who, when the crisis came, were nowhere to be found. Chukwemike was in Lagos. He had a life there now, a wife, children, a job that paid inconsistently and demanded completely. He sent small amounts of money when he could. It was not enough. Ifeanyi had traveled to Abuja 3 years earlier, chasing a government contract that never materialized. He was still there, still chasing, too proud to come home empty-handed. Tochukwu, the golden one, the celebrated one, the son whose birth was worth 3 days of feasting, was in Port Harcourt. He had a woman there. He called on Sundays when he remembered. And so, Okeke sat in his compound in the dry, cracked village with Adaku, and the hunger growing louder every day, and the sons he had sacrificed everything to raise were nowhere to be found. The daughter he had dismissed was not there either, but for different reasons entirely. It was a government relief coordinator who first mentioned the name. Okeke had gone to the local government office to register for food assistance. The line was long. The sun was punishing. He sat on a bench outside with other men from surrounding villages, all of them quieter than usual, all of them carrying the particular heaviness of proud men who have been brought low. The coordinator, a young man in a neat blue shirt, was speaking to the group about supply chains. He mentioned a trader, a major food supplier, who had partnered with the relief program to distribute grains and dried goods across the affected zones. Her operation was the largest and most reliable in the region, he said. Everything was moving through her warehouses. He mentioned her name. Okeke looked up. He asked the young man to repeat it. The young man repeated it. Okeke sat very still for a long time. Adaku beside him had gone completely silent. They did not go immediately. There was shame in going. Okeke understood this with the full weight of a man who had once sat in a parlor with his friends and told a brilliant 14-year-old girl that her future was none of his concern. He understood what it would mean to walk to that woman with his cap in his hands. He spent 3 days sitting with that shame. On the 4th day, the last of the food in the house finished. He rose, put on his best agbada, the one he had bought for Tochukwu's naming ceremony, and told Adaku to get ready. They arrived at the distribution center in a town 2 hours from the village. It was a large compound, organized, clean, busy. Workers moved with purpose. Trucks came and went. There were people everywhere, but there was order in the movement, the kind of order that comes from someone who runs things properly. Okeke and Adaku stood at the entrance with 2 relatives they had brought for support. Okeke's younger brother Namdi and Adaku's sister Chidima. 4 of them standing at the gate of this place, unsure of what to say to the gateman. "We want to see the madam. Tell her family has come," Okeke told the gateman. The gateman studied them, then he went inside. They waited in the sun. She was in the middle of reviewing delivery manifest when her office assistant knocked and told her, "Family from Umunze, madam, an older man and woman. He says to tell her family has come." Amara did not move for a moment. She set the manifest down slowly. She straightened the papers on her desk with both hands. She took a breath that nobody else in the room could see the weight of. "Send them in," she said. She heard them before she saw them. The shuffle of the older man's sandals. The low voice of her mother saying something to someone in the corridor. The sound of people trying to compose themselves before walking through a door. Then the door opened, and there they were. Okeke had aged. She had not expected the aging to affect her, but it did. Not with softness, not yet, but with something more complicated. He was smaller than she remembered. The broadness of his shoulders had thinned. His agbada, his best one, was still neat, but the years had pulled at him the way years pull at all men who have carried pride as their primary load. Adaku stood slightly behind him, her mother, the woman who had fed her and bathed her, and looked away when the looking away was required by the man she lived with. Adaku's eyes found Amara first and filled up immediately. She pressed her man to her mouth. Okeke's eyes moved around the office first, taking in the size of it, the organized shelves, the framed certifications on the wall, the evidence of a life fully built before they finally landed on her daughter. He opened his mouth. Then he closed it again. It was Namdi, his younger brother, who spoke first. "Amara, Nne, look at what God has done." "Uncle Namdi," her voice was calm. "Please sit down, all of you." They sat. She remained standing. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The office held the weight of 15 years of silence, and it was not a small weight. Then Okeke leaned forward and cleared his throat. "Amara, we have come. I know why you have come, Papa." The word Papa landed in the room like something physical. Okeke flinched slightly. Adaku's breath caught. "There is a famine," Amara continued, her voice even and measured. "The village is struggling. You heard my name connected to the relief supply, and you came." "We came because," Okeke started. "I know why you came." She looked at him directly, not with anger, with something steadier than anger. "You are my daughter, Papa," he said, and there was something genuine in his voice now, cracked through with something real. "Whatever happened?" Amara repeated the phrase quietly, almost to herself. "Papa, you told me that my education would come through the man I married. You told me this in front of your friends. I was 14 years old. I had just brought you proof that I had the mind to become something, and you folded the letter and set it on the table." Okeke looked down. "You did not just say no," Amara continued. "You told me that being a girl meant I was not worth the investment. You said it like it was simply true, like it was the natural order, like I should accept it and go back to the kitchen." Adaku was crying now, not loudly, the quiet weeping of a woman who has spent years not saying the things she should have said. "Mama," Amara's voice softened by 1 degree, only one. "I know you did not have power in that house. I know you fed me and you held me when you could. I am not talking to you the same way I am talking to him." She turned back to Okeke. "I left because staying was killing something in me that I needed to survive. I built this," she gestured at the office, the compound beyond the window, "from nothing. Not because someone invested in me, because I refused to accept that I was not worth investing in." Okeke's hands resting on his knees had tightened into fists, not in anger, in something much harder to sit with. "I am not here to punish you, Papa," Amara said. "I want you to understand that." He looked up. "But I am also not going to pretend. You will not come here and receive my help as if the past did not happen. You will sit with what the past means, and then we will talk about what I am willing to do." She asked her assistant to bring them food and water. While they ate, and she watched them eat, watched her father accept the food with hands that were not steady, she stepped outside to the compound. She stood in the open air for a few minutes. The trucks were moving. Her workers were calling each other across the yard. The business she had built was alive and moving around her. She allowed herself one moment of feeling everything. The grief of the girl she had been, the weight of what it had taken to become who she was, the complicated thing in her chest that was not quite forgiveness and not quite revenge, but something more honest than either. Then she went back inside. She sat down. She folded her hands on the desk. "Here is what I will do." Okeke and Adaku leaned forward. Namdi and Chidima were very still. "The village of Umonze will receive relief supply through my distribution program. Every family registered will receive their allocation. Your household will be included, not more than others, not less, equal, the way it should have been in your house." Okeke closed his eyes briefly. "In addition," she continued, "I will fund a borehole for Umonze, clean water. Not because of what happened here today. I had already planned it for 3 communities in this zone. Umonze is on the list." "Amara," Adaku started. "Let me finish, Mama." She said it gently. "I will do these things not because you came here and I was moved by sentiment. I will do them because they are the right things to do and because I have built myself into a woman who does the right thing regardless of who deserves it." She paused. "But I want you to carry something home with you today." She reached into the drawer of her desk. She placed something on the table in front of her father. It was old and creased and had been folded so many times the paper had softened at the edges. The scholarship letter, the one from her headmaster, the one he had folded and set on the table 30 years ago, the one she had carried in the bottom of her raffia bag the morning she left the village. Okeke stared at it. His face changed. Not quickly, not dramatically. The change came slowly, like the cracking of something that had been held rigid for a very long time. His jaw moved. His eyes went wet, the eyes of a man who had not cried in decades, who would not cry now, but whose eyes had betrayed the rest of him. I kept it, Amara said simply. Not to use against you. I kept it because it was the first proof that somebody believed in me. My headmaster believed in me, and I decided the night you dismissed it that I would believe in myself the way he did. That paper is why I am sitting here. She did not touch it again. She left it on the table between them. You can take it with you, or leave it. That is your choice. The way everything that happened between us was your choice. Okeke picked up the letter. He held it in both hands the way a much younger man might hold something he understood was irreplaceable. He looked at his daughter. And for the first time in her life, for the very first time, Okeke looked at Amara the way a father looks at a child he is proud of, not despite everything, because of everything, because of what she had done with what he had refused to give her, because she was sitting in that chair, because she had built all of this, because she had become this. I was wrong, he said. The words were low. They cost him something. She could hear what they cost him. I was wrong about you, Amara. I was wrong about what a daughter could be. I was wrong about everything I taught you about your own value. He stopped. His voice had gone rough. I am sorry, Amara. I am sorry. Adaku was weeping openly now. Chidema had her hand on Adaku's back. Even Namdi, the uncle who tried to smooth things over at the beginning, was looking at the floor with his hands pressed together. Amara looked at her father. She let the apology exist in the room without rushing to dissolve it. She felt the weight of it. She felt everything underneath it. 30 years of a particular kind of pain. The particular loneliness of a child who is present but invisible. The particular cost of building yourself from a wound. She felt it. And then she spoke. I hear you, Papa, she said. Not I forgive you. Not it is fine. Not let us forget all of it. I hear you. We will not go back, she said quietly. We will not pretend it did not happen, but we will go forward. Carefully, honestly. You will see me as I am, not as a substitute for the daughter you wanted me to be, or not as a miracle to celebrate now that I am useful. Just as I am. Okeke nodded. His hands were shaking slightly. Can you do that? She asked him. He looked at her for a long moment. I will learn, he said. If you give me the chance, I will learn. She walked them out herself. She stood at the gate of her compound and watched them go. Her father, with the scholarship letter folded in his agbada pocket. Her mother, who turned twice to look back at her with eyes that said everything Adaku had never found words for. When they had turned the corner and were out of sight, Amara stood there for one more moment. The sun was warm on her face. The compound was alive behind her. Trucks, voices, purpose, movement. She thought of the girl who left that village with a raffia bag and a decision. She thought of Mama Ifioma and the envelope pressed into her hands on a birthday morning. She thought of every market, every supplier, every negotiation, every night she had sat alone in a small room and counted her money and decided it was enough to keep going. She thought of her father holding that letter. She turned and walked back inside. There was work to do. There was always work to do, and she had never been afraid of work. If someone who hurt you deeply comes back needing your help, do you help them and heal, or do you protect yourself and walk away? Drop your answer below. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today, and drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.